Listen, thank you all very, very much for being here. This is intended to be more of a conversation and a discussion and a dialogue than it is for sort of a one-sided sort of view of things. We're going to present some baseline information, and then we really want to hear your views on things. We've gotten a lot of emails and letters, and I know we've all looked at those and will continue to. And we're kind of a little bit beyond midstream in the budget process, so this is a very, very important meeting today, and I want to thank again every one of our citizens for being here and giving us your expertise and your thoughts and what's important to you, because what's important to you is important to us. So let me introduce a couple other folks here who are here today. First of all, with City Council, we have Phil Duncan and Dan Z and Karen Oliver. So please feel free after this session to speak with any one of us, and because that's another key part of what we do. It's not just collective meetings like this, it's the one-on-ones that you can uniquely have in a small city like Falls Church, and of course Wyatt Shields, our city manager. So if you want to blame anybody, blame Wyatt. No, just kidding. Just kidding. We're all in this together, and we're going to be making the decisions in the next few weeks along with the community, because in the City of Falls Church, there's no real division between the citizens and the government. We're one and the same. We all are part of this enterprise. And speaking of part of this enterprise are the schools, and we have a great representation here from the schools. We have Susan Kearney, who's the chairman of the school board, Justin Castillo, who's the vice chair, and Tony Jones, who's the superintendent. And we also have Tom Clinton, another elected official here who has a lot to do with the city's economic welfare. Is there anyone else that I should introduce that's sort of been elected? But I want to tell you that this is all about you, the citizens. It's not about us. We're anxious to know what you think, what your analysis is, what expertise you can provide to help us make the right decisions. And now I'll pass it on to Wyatt Shields, and look forward to a great discussion this morning. And once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Snyder. My name is Wyatt Shields. I'm your city manager. And again, thank you for being here on this Saturday morning. We do have a number of slides. It's actually about 21 slides I have, and I'm going to go through them quickly because I do recognize faces in this room. A lot of the people in the room are very familiar with these numbers, but I think it is helpful just to make sure that the information on the baseline of our financial condition is out there for the community. And then again, the main purpose of this meeting, though, is to hear from you and get your questions, get your comments. Thematically, I think one of the big things for the council to wrestle with this budget is looking ahead to our capital program so that we're investing in our streets, in our buildings, in our infrastructure. And we know there are price tags associated with that, and we need to do those things. And so keeping our operating budgets to provide excellent level of services that citizens demand, but to do so in a sustainable way so that we can accomplish the service delivery, but also with an eye towards long-range planning. A couple of things that I will just note right off the bat. We are a growing city. We're a very active and vital part of the National Capital Region. Our population is growing. Our number of police calls are growing. Participation in all of our youth programs is growing. Our library program has increased by over 36% participation in our reading program, story time, and building permit activity is very active across the city as well. And that's a good thing. It is great to have this type of vigor in our community. And we've been doing this on the general government side with a leaner staff than we traditionally have. Right now, we're at about 10% lower staff levels than we traditionally had prior to 2009. So when we went through the recession, we did about a 15% reduction in staffing levels over about the 3-year period of the recession. And we've come back with some targeted new positions, generally in the area of public works and development services is where we've put positions back in our budget over the past 3 years. In terms of our spending per capita, this is the cost of government on a per capita basis. The pink line at the bottom is the City of Falls Church, and we're comparing ourselves to the City of Fairfax, Alexandria, and Arlington. Those are 3 urban localities that maintain streets, do the full suite of municipal services similar to the City of Falls Church. They do them on a larger scale than we do. But on a per capita basis, we have, with the reductions in staffing principally that we've had to undertake, maintained that flat on a per capita basis since 2007 and fallen, in fact, a little bit below some of our peers. When we got together in November, the council looked at initial budget forecasts from our CFO, Richard LeCondre, who is here in the back of the room, and the council gave us budget guidance. And one of the key pieces of their guidance was that for general government activities, we don't want to have a tax rate increase to pay for those general government activities. In other words, have them be paid for through economic growth. And so we do have economic growth in the city, obviously, and that's generating a 4.6% increase in revenues, and the general government budget is increasing by 3.6%. Overall, so we have organic revenue growth of 4.6%, general government growth of 3.6%. The school board request is 9.77% growth. We have additional revenue required to meet those needs of $1.65 million. And so we have advertised a real estate tax rate with a 4.5-cent increase up to $1.35. So that's what the budget is that's before the council right now, and that they're working with a lot of public input. Very briefly, this is where our revenue comes from. We're heavily dependent on real estate taxes. Just about 60% of our funds come from real estate taxes. Personal property, meals and utility taxes, sales taxes, and around the horn constitute our other streams of revenue. A very small reliance on state and federal funds on the general government side. I will note that. And then within real estate, about 22% of that comes from the commercial sector. The remainder of that comes from residential uses, about 5% apartments, and then everything else is townhouses, single-family homes, and condos. So we have had a year of growth of assessed values in the city, 6.8% overall. We do have significant growth in the apartment sector, and that's because of the market, but also the Northgate project coming online with their assessments. One thing I'll note is we've talked about growth in the city. New construction has added $53 million of value to our tax rolls in the past year. And that's about 25% of the overall increase in assessed value this year. That's single-family homes. You see all the tear downs and rebuilds across the city. But also very significantly, that's the Hilton Garden Inn coming forward, as well as the Northgate projects. Here's a comparison of our regional tax rates in the Northern Virginia region. And if you look at this chart, we're showing the proposed rates across the region. And here with the City of Falls Church at the proposed rate of $1.35. Council has not yet agreed to that rate, but that's what's in the budget that's before them. That compares, if you look at the counties are typically below that rate, but if you add in some of the services that we have baked into our tax rate, notably trash collection, which they do not, this is probably a more accurate comparison to the tax rates. So across the region, the average rate is $1.29. The smaller localities, the Vienna, Leesburg, Herndon, Manassas, Percival, Manassas Park, we're in the middle of the pack in terms of the smaller municipalities in Northern Virginia. But one of the big issues with this year's budget is that with the assessed value growth and the tax rate increase, we have a significant increase in the median homeowner's property tax bill. The median home value in the city is $608,000 this year. So of the increase, $442 is due to assessment growth for your average homeowner in the city, and $274 is due to the tax rate increase. And so that's a big part of what the council is wrestling with right now in terms of the impact of this budget. on our citizens. The Council's budget guidance to me months ago was to bring forward proposals for senior tax relief to expand that benefit. And so what we've worked with the City Treasurer, Kathy Kay, and Nancy Vincent in our Human Services Department, a proposal to double the benefit for seniors making up to 30% average or area median income, and to expand the eligibility up to 80% of the area median income to provide some tax relief for seniors and persons with disabilities in the city. For seniors that have an income under $75,000, which is 100% of area median income for a household of one, may defer all of their real estate tax bill until the point of sale, which would occur anytime in the future. But that deferral part of the program would continue. On the expenditure side, this is a pie chart that shows where the money goes, with 45% going to education, and then around the horn, public safety of 14% of our expenditures, public works 7%, recs and parks and library 6%. Debt service is currently 6% of our budget, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the CIP in just a moment. I've got a few slides that we'll post on the webpage. It's just a helpful summary, and I'm not going to read through the next 5 slides in detail, but just in terms of the things that the city government provides, it's useful just to put those out there and describe those. In the environment, obviously, we do curbside garbage collection and recycling, and we do have the highest recycling rate in Virginia, and that's very good for the environment. It's also very good for our bottom line because we get revenues back when we take your bottles, your cans, your newspapers to market. Our paving, our leaf collection, we maintain 22 facilities, and sometimes people lose track of that, but we have about 160,000 square feet of built environment on the city side that we maintain, as well as our streets, sidewalks, etc. In development services, we processed last year 2,100 building permits, and that includes all of our electrical and heating or gas and trade permits, as well as the larger building permits. We manage the special exception applications and site plans, very complex projects that are coming through the city process, and planning for the future. And public safety, obviously we're a 24/7 operation, 364 days a year. We receive about 60,000 calls into our 911 center here, which is really incredible. That results in 26,000 calls for service per year. And we're able to maintain an average response time that's very low, the lowest in the region because of our size. 250 criminal investigations per year. And so we have a very small criminal investigation division, and they have higher caseloads than is typical for police departments in the region. We also have a school resource officer, which is really critical in our relationship with the schools. And we contract fire services with Arlington County, and our volunteers also contribute to that effort. We maintain our court system here in this room with court 1 day a week for general district court and juvenile and domestic court 1 day a week as well. Mary Riley Stiles has never been busier than it is right now in terms of circulation, in terms of participation in our programs at the library. We have, in terms of our population that has a library card, we're the highest in Virginia, and we may be the highest in the country. This is a city that really participates very actively and loves its library. Recreation and Park, also very busy activity in terms of participation in our youth programs, athletic programs, subscription to our learning programs that we have at the community center, and of course our summer camp programs. And human services. We take care of youth that enter into the judicial system. We do that on the local level as opposed to contracting that out to the state. And we think that's really critical for avoiding recidivism and helping our youth get back on track when they get into trouble. We have the Aurora House, which is a girls' home in partnership with Arlington County, as well as the Argus House, a boys' home for children that need to be taken out of their home environment for special services for a period of time and then returned back to their homes. We administer 40 affordable dwelling units across the city as well. One thing that I've noted before about the reductions in staff, most of those reductions were in administrative support. And so we're right now at 10% lower staff levels than we've had prior to 2009. The majority of those reductions were in administrative support. We have 36 boards and commissions in the city of Falls Church. We're very proud of that. That's a big way of how we get things done in the city. But that is a big part of the activity of our administrative support in the city as well, to support all those boards and commissions. For anyone who does want to get involved in those, we have a list of all of our boards and commissions on the table when you came in, which also lists our vacancies. And so if you would like to be involved in city government, that's a great way to get involved. In terms of compensation, we'll be talking about that with the City Council on Monday night. What I've proposed in the budget is a 3% merit increase for employees. And what we'll talk about is how that works in just in the context of where we've been over the past 5 or 6 years. And we did have a number of years of salary freezes. And so if you look over the past 6 years, since 2008, we have an 11.5% total salary increase for employees since that time. We also have increased the employee contributions to our pensions, and so what employees have actually felt in their pocketbook has been, in fact, a 6.5% net increase over the past 6 years. That is, in fact, the market in local government. We've been a little bit more austere than some of our jurisdictions immediately around us, but that is pretty typical in terms of the suppression on salary increases in local government that you see across the region. Very briefly on our capital projects, and the capital is just a huge area of our budget, but I can't cover it in terms of the time that we have tonight in great detail. But we do have key investments in the community in the coming year. $402,000 for investment in our community center for sort of core infrastructure needs there. Mount Daniel School will get underway in the coming year. We will have a referendum on the ballot in November for what is about a $16 million project to expand Mount Daniel to meet that cohort of our educational needs. $8 million of that is in FY15, and then the remainder is in FY16. We'll begin our high school planning, George Mason High School, and in the CIP we have some initial planning money to get that underway. We have investments in public safety for police dispatch, firearms range, and upgrades at our Fire Station 6 just down the hill. $200,000 for park master plan implementation, and $1.1 million for open space acquisition to preserve open space in the city. In terms of our fund balance is right now at the end of FY13 at just under $15 million, and we're deploying all of the funds that are above our policy target of maintaining a fund balance of at least 17% of our annual expenditures. All of that extra fund balance is being deployed in the budget for capital improvements in the community, and then we maintain the target out through our planning horizon of the next 15 years. But obviously in the prior years, we talk about fund balance as being our emergency reserve for contingencies, and we've experienced that in our recent past as we went through the recession, dealt with water litigation and other adverse impacts financially. We really relied heavily on fund balance as we went through those cost reductions as well as tax rate increases that we've experienced to make up for the loss of those revenue streams. Debt service in the capital program, what we currently spend on debt service is just about $5 million per year, and that funds basically an entire built environment that you see right now. If we implement the CIP, that debt service is going to increase up to just below $8 million. And that's the equivalent, this growth in debt service is the equivalent of about 8 cents on the tax rate in of itself. And so as we do our capital planning, we have to be very mindful about our financial plan and our overall financial sustainability. One thing that's very notable about this debt service projection is that it does not include debt service for a new high school. We're working very closely with the school board, with financial planners, to put together a financial plan for a high school, which will involve economic development potentially on the school site as well to help pay for that and help mitigate those costs. But ultimately, there will be the need for local funds to support that high school as well, and that's not yet modeled into that chart. We do have a stormwater utility that was created last spring so that we can address local flooding issues, comply with federal mandates, and take care of what is very aging stormwater infrastructure across the city. We have a budget of $1.5 million in FY15, which is level funding from last year, and a CIP of $5.4 million, which includes the projects that are listed in our watershed management plan. But notably, in the coming months, you will see the flooding mitigation project for the flooding that occurs on Little Falls and Great Falls that will get underway this summer or this fall and be completed by January, and then the Coe and Pearson Branch stormwater projects, which are funded in part by federal grants, those will be underway this summer as well. Those are just two visible projects that we'll see in the coming months. Our stormwater fee is based on impervious surfaces, and we have an information sheet back on the table about how that works. It comes to about a cost of, for the average homeowner in the city, about $250 a year. And so we've taken that out of the tax rate, and the reason we did that is that we meet these costs at a lower cost for homeowners and a higher cost for strip mall owners and commercial property owners that tend to be paved wall to wall on their properties. And so in terms of the equity of the cost sharing for that, the decision was that using impervious surfaces was the fairest way to do that. It also allows people to get credits if they do things that will reduce the impact of stormwater across the city. So that's a quick overview, again, with the budget summary that we talked about in the beginning. We do have the need for additional revenue for the budget that's before the council and the tax rate increase that's part of that. And the council will be working that over the next three weeks with a schedule of adopting the budget on April 28th after a series of public hearings and town hall meetings like this one, and then this budget goes into effect after the council has made its decisions on July 1st. I would just note that our upcoming public hearing is on April 16th. We've shifted that date. It was originally on April 14th, but in respect for the religious holiday of Passover, we have moved that date to April 16th, so I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. So we will, I'd be happy to answer questions, but if I could turn the microphone over to Chairman Carney now for a review of the school budget, and then we will answer questions.
Thanks, Wyatt. While she's doing that, let me welcome you. I think this is the first sunny, kind of warm spring day we've had on a Saturday this year, and so I know it was hard for me to convince myself to come sit inside with the shades down for a couple hours, so thanks for coming. Before talking to you about what's in the school budget and the challenges we face, I wanted to just give you a little summary of how we got to this budget, what our process is. Because as I've been in the community the last few weeks, I've had a lot of people ask me how we do it. We start in January, just after the first of the year. The superintendent presents her budget request. She and her team have been working on it almost since the last budget was approved, but really starting in the fall, and that's the baseline we start from. We then have 5 or 6 work sessions, the full school board, where we collect data and information, look at scenarios. This year I think we looked at 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 different budget scenarios before we made our decisions. We had 4 or 5 public hearings this year where people in the community would have a chance to come and tell us what they thought. We strategically placed that so that as we start to make some decisions and the public can see that, we have a hearing so they can give us specific feedback about those decisions. And then we finally weigh in and vote on it. So it's quite a lengthy process for us. Our superintendent and our CFO, Mr. Hunter Kimball, put in 24/7 kinds of schedules for about 2 months, putting together the data and the scenarios and responding to our needs. So that's how we get to what I'm going to present to you this morning. To start off, we have really 2 challenges that we're wrestling with as a school board and a school community and a city here in Falls Church related to education. The first you see here, and that is we are growing in terms of the number of students enrolled in our schools. The chart here shows that this particular year, fiscal year 14, we added 6.1% more children, and next year we expect 7.1% more children in our schools. So we have a lot of growth. And if you read the Washington Post like I do, you'll see they have growth elsewhere in Northern Virginia in schools as well, but we have a lot more growth than anyone else does in our area, and it turns into a lot of children. Interestingly, and I had never seen this data before this year, and Dr. Jones pulled it together, but if you look at the City of Falls Church, 17% of the folks who live in our town are enrolled in our schools. As compared with surrounding jurisdictions, Fairfax is about the same, but if you look at Arlington, less than 10% of the people who live in Arlington are enrolled in schools. This is just interesting. It shows you a little bit about the demographics of different communities. This community has a reputation for being friendly to families, and so families move here and they bring their kids and they go in our schools. Whereas in Arlington, for example, in the subway corridor there, they're attracting young singles and others to the condos and the nightlife that they have there. And so this kind of explains our growth, I think, a little bit. And then Alexandria, not even 9%. So interesting data to frame our budget. We've had questions in the community about our forecast. The way we do those forecasts, just so you know, is we have the Weldon Cooper Center down at UVA. They're the demographers to our General Assembly and to others. We have them model out student enrollment forecasts for us for annually for 5 years and then 10 years, 15, 20 years, so we can see what's going on. And then we have our CFO, Hunter Kimball, create his own forecast, and he layers on top what we know about economic development in the city. And our forecasts have been amazingly accurate the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, to within, less than 10 kids. So we feel confident our forecasts are correct. But this is the cycle, literally since 1950. And usually cycles for kids, it's like a business cycle. They'll grow and recede and grow and recede. And the school board's been asking our demographers and our staff for the last several years, when are we going to hit the top? And when is the roller coaster going to start down? And no one is forecasting that to happen anytime in the near future. So we see growth continuing over time. So that 7.1% growth next year, that translates into 172 kids we will be adding to our schools. That's about like adding a grade. Our grades are about that size, although in this year in kindergarten we have 200 children, which is huge for us. So it's about 172 kids. You'll see between next year, which is highlighted in red, and the following 2 years, we'll be adding about 559 children to our school division. That's about the size that Mary Ellen Henderson, our middle school, is today. So over the next 3 years, we'll essentially be adding another whole school of kids to our already crowded facilities. So we're growing. That's the first kind of highlight. The second challenge we have is our professional staff are dramatically underpaid. As you can see in this chart, compared to Arlington County, 5 to 25% less. In terms of dollars for our teachers, that's anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 a year in their paycheck. We compare ourselves most closely to Arlington County because that's where people we're trying to recruit who don't accept our contracts are going. and that's where some of our veteran staff who are outstanding are leaving us to go. This year, for the first time, we had the experience of having had job offers accepted and then rejected 24 hours later when they got offers from Arlington County. So our teachers can go to a high-performing school division 1 mile away and make much more money. But it's not just Arlington County. We look across the region and to all of our neighbors, and we see, and these are just kind of excerpts. If you're interested more in the information about teacher pay, Dr. Jones can show you the complete salary scale and talk to you about that. But literally, compared to Arlington County, every level, every step, every lane, we are paying less to our teachers. But anyway, so compared to our neighbors, our pay is still low, and region-wide, if you looked at the 8 or 9 school divisions surrounding us, so we have to fix that, and this budget incorporates money for a 4-year plan to get our teachers up, not equivalent with Arlington County, but within shouting distance, so that we can keep our good staff and recruit more. So with those 2 challenges in mind, what are the numbers? They're summarized here. We have 3 budgets that the school board is responsible for. The operating budget is the major one. That's where we have things like teachers and librarians and buses and transportation and the things that educate our kids on a day-to-day basis. Second, we have the community service budget. This is essentially a self-funding budget, and in that is the daycare fund where parents pay for extended daycare for their children before and after school, but also rental fees for the use of our buildings and fields, and the fees to maintain and use those things. And then finally, our food service budget, once again, that's kind of self-funding. Parents essentially pay, and the meals cover the cost there. The operating budget is, as Mr. Shields said, the increase is to about $44 million. It's about a 9.8% increase. You see here the key sources of funds for our school division and how those are increasing. As with the city, we're seeing decreased federal funds. In a moment, I'll show you the magnitude of the funding for our schools. We did get an increase in state funding this year, which is really unusual for us. Most of the money, you probably know this if you read the Post or live around here, but most of the tax dollars that we pay here in the City of Falls Church and in Northern Virginia, broadly speaking, that go to Richmond do not come back to us. We get back, I've heard different things, but 10, 11, 12, 15 cents on the dollar comes back to our jurisdictions. And so when we get an increase from the state, it's pretty exciting for us. And it's based on growth this year. It's based on growth. We actually had a call from the folks in Richmond when we sent our enrollment numbers in September because they thought we'd made a mistake. They couldn't believe how much growth we had, so I guess they'll be calling us again this fall. So we're happy to have that, but as it turns out, while that's very helpful, state funds are a really tiny part of our budget, as are federal funds. If you look here, almost 83% of the money that we use for education comes from your wallet and my wallet and your wallet. It comes from the taxes that we pay here in the City of Falls Church. And that's because the state considered us to be one of the most affluent communities. And so a lot of the money that we send down to Richmond gets sent to other places in the state. There are places in the state that receive 30, 40, 50% of their education budgets from the state. But that's not the case for us here in Falls Church. So we're kind of on our own, paying for it ourselves. In terms of the expenditure side, you'll see that the vast majority of the money for education goes to the classroom, almost 77%. That's a very high percentage in comparison with other school divisions and in comparison with state laws and regulations. So we're very proud of that. And since 2007-8, when we started having tough financial times, one of the things the school board has done is focus very much on keeping as much money in the classroom as we can. To that end, you'll notice that, for example, our administrative costs in the kind of blue there at 5% are very, 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 very low. We've consolidated, we've shifted, we've cut, we've done all the things that we think we can do to keep money in the classroom. We did do an operational efficiency study in the schools this year. We had a third party come and take a look at all of our operational processes and staffing and organization to tell us if there were other efficiencies we could gain. They came back with very, very few recommendations for us. So we feel like we've pretty much cut that to the bone. And so now what's left is what's in instruction. We have made some tough choices this year. Every year we ask the superintendent before she brings us her budget to look at reprogramming, consolidating, shifting, moving, and saving money in that way, and she does. We added some student fees a few years ago, and we've maintained those after some discussion once again. And then the school board has reduced the request by delaying a bus that we hope we won't have to have at the end of the day next year, reducing some positions and pre-funding some furniture and other things that we need to set up new classrooms to put our new kids in. And of course, we have always a list of unfunded needs that we just can't afford to pay for presently. So if you look at the request this year, if you look in dollars not adjusted for inflation, you'll see that the per pupil spending that we're requesting is just about the same as what we were spending in fiscal year '07. We had some cuts back during the worst parts of the recession, so we're just about back to where we were 7, 8 years ago. If you adjust those dollars for inflation, then our per pupil spending since fiscal year '07 has actually dropped by about 17%. And we think that's because of responsible fiscal management on the part of our staff and our school board to try to use every dollar as wisely as possible to educate our children. If you look over the last 5 years, we've had this question in the community because last year our requested increase was a lot, and this year it's high. People are saying, well, what the heck, why do you need increases more than your growth? And so we went back and looked, and if you can see, over the last 5 years, the average of our student enrollment is about 4.24% over that time, while the city transfer has grown less, as has our budget. So if you take a little bit longer perspective, things kind of average out. So we're really still in the schools trying to catch up to some of the dramatic cuts that we've taken and try to do the best we can with the new kids that we have. So the 9.8% increase, there are basically 3 components. One component is things that are mandated that we must do in our budget. Dr. Jones can give you a list of precisely what those things are, but they have to do with standards of quality, state laws about certain kinds of staffing levels and certain things we must do to educate special ed and other kinds of children. The second thing is retirement for our staff. We are required by law to use the state's retirement system and to pay in based on their decisions about that, health care and other things. So we have about a little less than 1.1 million of things that are mandated to us that we have to do. Then we have about 1.6%, which is equitable pay. This is in response to the slides I showed you before about our teacher pay. This is the first year of a 4-year program to get our teachers up to a reasonable level for our region. We had asked the superintendent to do this in 3 years, and she pulled the numbers together and it just wasn't possible, so we extended it to 4 years to do that. And then the last is expenses related to the growth in the number of students. So that's where all the money is going. Is this reasonable? When we put our budget together, the school board evaluates a whole bunch of different data to see if what we're requesting makes sense, if it meets the practical test. The first thing is, if you look here, you'll see that our fiscal year 15 proposed, the red here in the last bar, is just about, as a percentage of the city's operating budget, it's just about on target with what it is on average. So we're not asking for, 55, 60, some huge increase in the city's operating budget. It's just about the same as it's been the last 10 years. In terms of spending per pupil in our operating budget, we look at our neighboring jurisdictions to see how we compare. Arlington spends the most. We spend about the same as Alexandria. Alexandria gets a lot more of those dollars from the state and the federal government than we do, but it's about the same that we spend per student. Fairfax County there is lower. There are a couple reasons for that. One, if you read the Washington Post, you'll see their teacher pay is a little bit worse than ours. 2, their class sizes have increased to 28, 29, 30 students. So they have a real challenge there. And 3, they have economies of scale that we do not have here, nor does Alexandria or other jurisdictions. They are about 100 times as large as a school division than we are here in Falls Church. They have 170,000 kids in their schools over in Fairfax. Oh, I don't know how that one showed up again. So that's our budget, and I'll stop here, and I think, Wyatt, do you want to open it to questions? Is that what you are up to now?
Thank you, Chairman Carney. So with questions, comments, we do have this taped and will be webcast and appear on our cable access channel as well. And that's the purpose for the microphone. And so in terms of the logistics of that, I think we only have one in this room. Okay, so if you could come forward just to ask a question on the microphone. If we don't get it on the microphone, then I will repeat the question just so the folks watching on TV can understand what the question is. And with respect to questions, I think it is helpful if you can identify yourself and before you make a comment or your question, and we will do our best to respond. Those that we don't have immediate responses to, we will do the research on them and then post them online. So let's open it up, and we can just do it by a raise of hand. As the Vice Mayor said at the outset, this is meant to be a conversation and a dialogue. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Susan Van Gelder.
Are you going to be able to make it? Whoa.
Get pretty far. Susan Van Gelder. Okay, as best I can follow this early in the morning, I picked up a couple things on some of the charts. So one, I guess about 48% of the budget goes to the schools. And two, in your last slide, it looked like maybe almost 6 of the 9% increase is due to increased enrollment. Right, I think, okay. So maybe you could just comment generally, where do we see this going? I mean, I think enrollment looks like it's continuing to project upward, and density is a good thing, right? We want the city, I think, to be more dense to bring in more revenue. Is that revenue coming, and when is it coming, I guess is the question. Do we have any projections on that? Revenue not from property taxes, in other words.
Thank you. Those are excellent thoughts and questions. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to give it back to Wyatt. Yeah, it's about 46% of city operating funds going to education. Just, I should have mentioned this before, but just to put that in perspective, in Arlington County, it's about the same, 46, 47%. In Fairfax, it's 50, 51, sometimes 52%. So we're kind of in range. Yes, we do expect students to keep growing. And we need some creative solutions for that. I'm going to let my colleague here talk about economic development and those revenue flows. What I would say is that the school board has requested that the school board and city council create a small working group to address a couple questions. One is yours. How do we manage our finances over the long term when we expect that our revenue increases may not equal our student enrollment increases? We've been doing it year to year through the budget, but we'd like to come up with some longer term strategies, as well as to look at our budget process in general and see if there are improvements to it. So that's the response I would give. I'll give it to you to talk about other stuff.
Thank you. I think it's a basic principle. We need to have organic economic growth be on the same par as our operating budgets over the long haul. That's the definition of sustainability. Economic development is a key focus of the City Council and staff working together to increase density in our commercial districts. A fact, in our commercial districts across the city, they have currently about the same density as our single-family residential neighborhoods. We do want more density in our commercial districts. We want to expand the tax base. Now, we've been doing that with pure commercial development. The BJ's wholesale, the Hilton Garden Inn, the renovation of the Annandale Shopping Center. There's a whole host of just pure commercial development that is a priority for the city. Mixed-use development is also financially beneficial for the city in most instances. If you take the Spectrum, the Byron, the Reed Building, the Broadway, and Pearson Square, those projects are generating about $5 million of revenue that is above what used to be there before. They also have service costs. So the net fiscal impact of those projects is about $2 million per year. That's about a little under 7 cents on the tax rate. So that is part of the program as well. But we only have certain designated areas where we'll allow mixed-use development. And our focus across the city is to try to expand the tax base with commercial development.
But I guess my question is, when do you project we're going to get over this hump, that this revenue will start to meet the needs of the
Yeah. Well,
a lot of that space is empty. So when do we think we'll have the density that can fill all that space?
right. I mean, that's a big question, and we do have, we try to get our hands around that question. You know, several years ago, we did a big picture economic study with Stephen Fuller out of George Mason University to try to help us answer those types of questions. What is a sustainable trajectory for the city in terms of expanding our tax base to meet service growth across the board for public safety, schools, libraries, everything that we do. Right now, we're in a cycle where enrollment growth really is driving our overall our cost of government, and where that ends, I think, is something we're trying to get our hands around. But we don't know what the cycle of enrollment growth is going to be. It has been cyclical in the past. Right now, we're only seeing it on an upward trend. So it will stop at some point. We just don't know where that is. Not an entirely satisfactory answer, but.
And I think if we can, on the one hand, say we want increased density, and on the other hand, say the cycle will go down because we won't increase density.
Well, with mixed-use development that has a residential component to it, that clearly has an enrollment. It's part of the enrollment growth projection. Just on, you know, if you take over the past 5 years, where has the enrollment growth come from? The vast majority of it has come from cyclical changes in single-family neighborhoods. You know, a small household moves out, a new household moves in, often tears down the old building, builds a new one, and has a lot of students that come with that. That has been the principal generator of enrollment growth. But we're seeing it in every housing part of our housing component, whether it's our apartments up at Oakwood or whether it's Pearson Square. There has been enrollment growth in every sector, but the majority of it has been coming from trends in our single-family neighborhoods.
So I don't think it's going to go adjusting in some fashion someday.
The majority of it is cyclical. So out in the single-family homes in those neighborhoods, that has always been cyclical. And so that it's reasonable to expect that that will be cyclical. Now, with the pipeline of mixed-use projects, that is just a net increase of enrollment. That generally the revenues that come from that mixed-use development, however, greatly surpass the service costs that come with it as well. That's the reason why when we have special exceptions to allow it, we do a fiscal impact analysis, and it has to pass that test before it gets approved.
I would say you're exactly right, though. Our forecasts from the Weldon Cooper Center down at UVA, which are based on birth rate demographics, show growth for the next 20 years. So we don't see in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years it suddenly peaking. So.
Yeah.
We're actively, vigorously engaged in to address this very question, which is how are we going to meet the financial? I'm Phil Duncan on City Council, in case you didn't know. Good question, though, Susan. I mean, this is why, I mean, you come to these events and somebody says, hey, you guys are talking about economic development. Do you have any meetings about that? You know, duh, yeah, we do. We have a few. But you know, it's a legitimate question. Are we doing enough? Can we do more? I mean, the whole small area planning process, which maps out the zones in the city where various things are going to happen that we want to have happen. We are trying to plan the growth. At the corner of Broad and Washington, we hope to have an awesome, 4-star hotel and conference center someday. And, across the street at Brown's Hardware, Dogwood, that's going to be our little entertainment district, and on and on and on. I mean, the long-term future of the city lies in developing aggressively the West End new land by the Metro, right? And probably 30 years from now, the east side over by the Eden Center. When the Silver Line goes in, that Eden Center land is going to be some of the most valuable on the planet. Excuse me. So, yes, is the short answer. We are looking at that and trying to address that. Are we going to be able to do it, next year? No, but, every year if we do something, as we work on the budget, I think that we ought to be considering 2 or 3 projects at the same time to generate new revenue. Last year, Harris Teeter and the Fresh Market, Lincoln, and Rushmark came online just about the time we passed the budget. I think the council should set itself a goal to try to do that every year to answer just the question that you posed.
Next question. Mr. Laporta.
Gary Laporta. Wyatt, on your slide, you showed the real estate tax revenue coming in, and you mentioned 22% was commercial. Is that just the real estate tax? 22%? So that doesn't include the 5% sales tax, the 9% B-poll tax, and if you take personal property and slice it in half, a 3% personal property tax, which businesses pay a lot of, comes around 39%. That's coming from the commercial world. How do we compare to other jurisdictions as far as income from commercial endeavors in the city?
You're exactly right. It's actually about 50% of our revenue comes from the commercial sector when you include their share of utility taxes, their share of personal property, et cetera. And so that's harder to measure because in those tax receipts, it's harder to tell what's coming from commercial, what's coming from residential. One real easy marker, though, is the ratio of your real estate tax base, which is commercial, and how's that compared to other jurisdictions. And we're very similar to Fairfax County. Fairfax County is 21% of their real estate assessment comes from the commercial sector. But we're lower than Arlington. Arlington's about 28%. And we're lower than Fairfax City, which is about 35% of their real estate tax base is in the commercial sector. And so getting back to this theme, we're trying to grow the tax base in the commercial sector as part of our financial sustainability plan. That takes time, but it's a long-term effort that takes vision. The area planning that Councilmember Duncan mentioned is so important for the community, for us to be able to go to the development community and say, this is our vision for the future. We want you to be a part of it. And you have a pathway to be successful to do that. But the market has to be able to deliver that, and it will take time. I did want to note that Mayor Tarter has joined us. He was the honorary first pitch deliverer of the Little League season, and so he was not with us early on, but it's good to have you here.
No, but I will report that no one was injured.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Brian Rye, and I can say we have a 3-year-old son, but he's probably going to be an only child, so we're trying to cap our own enrollment growth for the schools going forward. He's starting Mount Daniel in 2016, so I'm excited to see that project move on. But moving further on down his high school, his scholastic career, I'm curious, I've seen a $100 million price tag for a new high school, and I'm curious where that comes from without any specific bids or plans that I've seen, and I bring this up for 2 reasons. I think there's going to be a ton of interest from eligible firms in getting that job. I mean, that's a highly visible, valuable piece of land that's visible not only from Leesburg Pike, but also the I-66 parking lot when people are sitting there. If they're not texting and they're on their orange line, they can see it, when they come in as well. So that's some millions of eyeballs daily, looking at that spot. And I think that's some pretty valuable advertising. And I suspect a lot of people will want it, and that'll be reflected in their bids. And I saw, some evidence. I was reading that the Fairfax County Thomas Jefferson Magnet School have some major renovations now. Looks like the original price tag was $90 million. The winning bid was $67 million, and I'm quoting here, "The decrease is the result of a competitive bidding process." And I think we'll have a chance to maybe get some benefits from that as well. The other part of the equation, I think, is on the city, though, and so I would ask city leaders to do a good job when it comes time to do this. And I think there is a need for a new high school on its own right and as part of redeveloping that plot of land, but to clearly define and separate needs from wants. We all want and need our kids to have and teachers to have a safe, encouraging environment to learn and all the tools they need. But it doesn't mean that the taxpayer should have to fund every bell and whistle that comes down the pike. It'd be great if the football field had individual chairback seatings for all our lower backs, but that's a want. It's not a need. It'd be great if there were 100 new maple trees that turn Mustang red in the fall. And that's a want, not a need. But I think there'll be opportunities, whether it's the nationwide network of George Mason alumni who have a chance to give back, or citizen groups. You see private universities have the class of 1980 solar panels or whatever put up. But just would encourage everyone when it comes time to do this. I know we're sort of nickel and diming things on the operating side, but if we could get a $100 million deal for $75 million or $80 million or $85 million, that's still a lot of money, but I'm interested in getting the best possible deal given the challenges that we face. Thanks.
If I can just address the number, we were actually just in a meeting on Thursday where we were talking about the number. It is a real number, and it's based off of one of the first things you do when you're looking at planning for a high school, and luckily we have large teams of people that have been thinking about this for a long time, is you build the program spaces. And you look at, for the size of high school that we're projected to be, and that ranges from 1,200 to 1,500. If we're looking out 15 years, we expect to have 1,500 students in our high school. And it's based off of every single area of a high school that you would need, from your gyms to your auditorium to your science labs. All of that has been programmed, and if you look on our website under the school board, and then there's a facilities tab, you can also go just on the main page of the website, and on the right-hand side, we're keeping all of these big projects where they're static, so you can just click on it, and you can go out and see that program. Right now, it's at 275,000 square feet, and all of the consultants and specialists advised us to use $350 a square foot, because that's not only program space, it's also unprogrammed, which means halls and common areas and spaces like that. So it is a real number. Now, what I can tell you is that when you talk about really working through the process, we would fully expect on a new high school that we would do exactly what we did on Thomas Jefferson, and that is to get the very best deal that we can for the city. And at Thomas Jefferson, when we had the QSCAB, we were expected to get 10 classrooms. By the time we got through our, I want to say, negotiating process, we ended up with 15 full-size classrooms, 3 smaller classrooms for special education. So we had 8 more classrooms than we were intended to have in that building. So we will aggressively, when we get ready to look at any new building, and even with Mount Daniel, we're in that process right now. We want to get the best deal we can for the city and for our children. And then Susan's going to talk about the process.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question. And I'd say we have a strong record in facilities for schools in this town, not only in getting a good price, but delivering the product on time and on budget. We don't have overruns, and so we pay close attention to that. We work closely with city staff to make sure that happens. I just want to comment for a quick second about that project. We do have a small group presently engaged in identifying the process we're going to use to figure out what's going to happen on the campus area down at George Mason. We've been meeting for almost 2 months, I guess now, on Thursday mornings at 7:30 a.m. You're welcome to come and observe. It's an open public meeting. We keep minutes, and they're published on the city's website and the schools as well. This is going to be a lengthy process. There are a lot of moving parts, and we'll be balancing our education needs and timing and space with the opportunity to develop some of that space to create revenue streams. But we are working on it. We've got folks from the Planning Commission, Economic Development, schools and city staff and elected officials who are heads down, and we'll be outlining a process that will include a lot of community involvement, a lot of staff and other involvement. We will be putting things out to bid and trying to get people to compete to give us the best price for what we're going to be doing there.
Next question. Let's go here with Mr. Benton and then Mr. Lajeunesse.
Yes, my question has to do with the fact that the response to the woman back here earlier seemed to be within the context of a closed system. Falls Church, you know, our 2.2 square miles, period. Tyson's Corners is the planners in Fairfax County are anticipating an incredible boom right up the street. They want to bring 200,000 new residents into Tyson's Corners, along with everything else with the opening of the Silver Line. My question is, has there been any effort to study the impact that that'll have on the city of Falls Church? Those new residents, the new economic development up there is going to have a massive impact here. You know, and that's going to do a lot for the numbers in Falls Church, I think. So is there anything being done to calculate what that might be?
Not formally, but we've been a very close observer of the Tyson's task force, and we know we've kept very close eye on their plans there and at Merrifield and all around the city. And all of those do present good opportunities for the city of Falls Church and a great opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves from what's happening in Tyson's, that we have a niche that I think is very desirable from an economic development perspective, from a quality of life perspective. And so we want to move deliberately to take advantage of the things that are happening in our region that preserves the character of the city, celebrates what we do well, and allows us to get an economic benefit out of it.
And we have two questions on this side.
I'm Peter Clark, and I've lived here since '77. So my question is on the fund balance. I don't know of any other jurisdiction in the country that has that size of fund balance in terms of the percentage. You carefully crafted a school board budget, you've carefully crafted a city budget, and you really know where your costs are, and you know what you're going to spend out. And the debt's amount, it's all fixed. So I don't understand why we need this 18% balance. To me, it makes no sense. If you want to fund the schools, there's where the money is. So it's like we're planning for doomsday, but there's no doomsday. So I really think that's where the money is, and that's what needs to be looked at.
There's always, in every budget year, a lot of discussion about fund balance. I'll just make a couple of notes on it. One, the fund balance is not just a doomsday scenario, it's also a cash flow issue. We get most of our revenue in 2 billing cycles in December, when our taxpayers pay in December and in June. And in the intervening periods, we continue with all of our programs and our spending, and so our actual fund balance, if you look at it through the year, there are times of years where it's significantly below that. But in terms of what is normal in the region, if you take the Moody's report in terms of cities our size that are AA rated or higher, the majority of them are between 17 and 18% for unassigned fund balance and 25 to 30% for total fund balance. And so our level is not unusual. And if you look at Vienna or Herndon or Leesburg or any of the jurisdictions that are our size around us, they typically are in that 20% range. And so it is normal, it is a best management practice. It also, though, when you're taking on capital projects and you have funds to back those up, obviously the people who buy your bonds, they want to see that you have some financial capacity. But two, we do, as the chairman said, we have a good record of managing these projects. But whenever you embark on a capital project, there is risk. There are things that are going to come up that perhaps you didn't plan for, that you couldn't plan for. And having some financial capacity to take advantage of the fact that you have a contractor on site, mobilized to do things, and you can do them at a lower cost. If you have funds available to do those, that's a great benefit ultimately for the taxpayer. When we began the Mary Ellen Henderson project back in 2004, we were carrying about a 30% of fund balance. And that accumulated fund balance, A, lowered the cost of that project, but two, when we were underway, we found that with the move of middle school out of George Mason High School, we needed science labs to make George Mason High School function properly. We had fund balance to take advantage of the fact that Clark was on site. We got that project done at a very low cost, and we used fund balance to do it. It's just an example. But I know there's a lot of discussion of it, and I'm sure that the council will continue to have the discussion on it as they go through as well.
I'm Bob Lajeunesse, South Virginia Avenue. Conspicuous in its absence in this discussion is the water proceed, the funds from the water sale, the proceeds from the water sale. The reason that's important, I don't know anybody that suggests we spend that in this year, but if we do, in fact, transfer that into the capital improvement plan, then there's no need to be transferring excess reserves in the fund balance also into that program, and that excess reserve can be used for other purposes. And I would argue that we should go way below 17%. Personally, I put it at 7%, because I don't think that it's helpful to have the fear-mongering that is often discussed when that comes up for discussion. For example, comparing or suggesting that a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or a government shutdown is going to interrupt our revenue flow is not helpful. I mean, that's like comparing the city to Detroit. I mean, it just rings empty. If we had a natural disaster here, FEMA and federal monies would be released and the state money would come as well. If we had a government shutdown, what would happen? Well, we know because it just happened for 3 weeks last fall, and yet our revenue is still flowing in, pretty abundantly or excessively. So what's happened in the past is we've taken these excess reserves after sort of knee-jerk reactions to raising the tax rate. We've taken excess reserve and quietly shifted them into capital improvement accounts or other reserve accounts. So there are a sufficient number of reserves that are already in the system. And so all of this suggests that we're going about our budgeting backwards. And what we've done in the past few years is determine what our savings levels should be and our debt levels should be. And then we've gained flexibility in the tax rate. What we need to start doing is looking to other jurisdictions and set our tax rate. Actually, Mr. Baruch, I don't see him here, but he suggested this in a committee meeting recently, that decide on a tax rate that is manageable and that there won't be a rebellion against, and then use your debt level and savings levels to accommodate that tax level. And so that's where you should be finding the smoothing in your budget, is in these rainy day funds. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that say we're raining now, and we all recognize that this is a pivotal time. We're on the cusp of a lot more revenue generation. If you just walk around the city, you see lots of homes being knocked down and rebuilt. Well, these are people who have intentionally agreed, or they're aware that they're going to double their tax bill. Okay, so they've gone into that knowing, so that money is forthcoming, as well as all the rest of the development. So we're really in a transitional period in which it makes sense to use some of our excess reserves that we've accumulated over the last 3 years to smooth out that tax revenue or those tax changes. Thanks.
Hi, my name is James Schoenberger, and I've got a question for Mr. Shields. You brought up an example a few minutes ago about a smaller house being acquired, perhaps torn down, and a more expensive house being put in its place. Now, if you had an example of, say, a $500,000 house that's occupied by 1 or 2 people, which is fairly common, and it is bought by a developer and it's replaced with, say, $1 million house, where the tax revenue will obviously double from that. But if, say, 2 children move into that house, I assume if they go to Falls Church Schools, that's a net revenue loser. Is that correct? Okay, now if that is correct, why are we not putting the brakes on that kind of development when we put the brakes on development in multifamily and commercial if it results in school children?
One thing, specifically to the question, people do have property rights, and those are laid out in our zoning ordinances. And so every house that gets rebuilt is aligned with what our building permits and what our zoning allows. And it's certainly not something that's only happening here in the city of Falls Church. It's happening throughout the region. One thing that is a basic principle of local government finance is that single-family homes are subsidized by the commercial sector. We were just talking a moment ago about 50% of our overall revenues come from the commercial sector. And so the most expensive housing type in the city is the single-family home neighborhoods. The condos and mixed use typically have been among the lowest cost housing type in the city, just because they typically have very small households and don't have high service costs. But we can't stop, so long as a house is built within what is allowed in zoning, that's a process that people have the rights to do with their property.
I beg to differ. My career was in the housing business. I'm a former developer, et cetera. I'd be happy to send you some suggestions on how to slow that development down to create less students.
I'd love to get that information. Thank you. Let's go here and then here.
Hi, Jürgen Torin. I wrote the guest commentary in this week's News Press. So just two comments. One is we have a very small footprint in Falls Church. So I think it would not be unreasonable to look at that footprint and those areas that can be developed and come up with some estimates on what revenue we might get. We might not know when, but we can certainly look at, okay, if we get a developer over at the West Falls Church or Eden Center, wherever it is, our maximum revenue looks to be X, and compare that with our costs. And I appreciate that one of the costs is growing at a greater rate than others is schools because of enrollment. Second point is, as I said in my commentary, there's a unit cost, and I understand that the City of Falls Church schools have a challenge because of economies of scale and class size. But looking at the university or the Department of Education, Virginia Department of Education school report cards, I don't think we're getting that much more or anything more than in terms of educational outcomes for our children than our neighboring schools. And so as I know, when I go shopping, I want to get the best value for my money, and I think it may be a perception issue. It may be that the Virginia Department of Education skews the numbers somehow, but I think if we're going to continue to give a large increase to schools, especially on a per-student basis, we have to be able to better make that distinction that we're getting something for by my calculation, we'll spend $9 million more given the current budget, to get the same outcomes as Fairfax County. And so we're just going to have to do a better job of showing what we're getting for our money. Because if I pay more taxes, I want to get more for it.
Thanks for your guest commentary. I know it takes time to write those things because I do it every so often, and thanks for your question. Our superintendent would be happy to sit down with you and talk to you in detail, but I would say our school division has the highest graduation rate in the area. As a percentage of students, we have the highest number of National Merit Scholar semifinalists and finalists in the area. The SAT scores at our high school are higher. We have an extremely high percentage of kids that go on to four-year colleges. We win state championships in many, many sports, to include academic sports and Odyssey of the Mind and robotics and things like that. And so if you went back to my commentary in the news press earlier this year and my one last year, I think we can strongly make the case that we have a lot of value for our dollar for our education system here in the city of Falls Church because of the student outcomes that we get. The other thing is, just as folks move to Falls Church, maybe you, maybe others here, because they like the small environment, the personal and intimate nature of it, their ability to have an impact and make a difference, we see the same thing in our schools. And families may choose to live in Fairfax County and have their child be one of 160,000 in their schools. But families come to Falls Church because of the intimate nature of our schools. Our children are known not just by their teachers, but by their guidance counselors, their assistant principals, their principals, and often their superintendent, in fact. And so these are the differentiators, the things that go beyond student performance, but the intangibles. And I think that the slide we showed this morning makes an articulate case for that, because we have 17% of the folks who live in our city are students in our schools. And in other jurisdictions, that's a lot lower. So I think they're both tangible and intangibles. And we'd be happy to have coffee with you and show you all the detail about that. Thanks for your question.
And I would just add as well that I do think that in Falls Church, the accessibility of our government and the responsiveness of our government, when we've done survey data, we find that there's a very high satisfaction for that in terms of being able to contact the right people and get a response for the services that you need. From an employee perspective, one thing that I think is really unique about Falls Church is the fact that we are so small that our employees really embrace the responsibilities that they have. They know that if they don't show up for work, the job's not going to get done, and they're going to be responsible for that. I think back to just snow removal, just as an example, in one of the storms we had this past week, we had an employee who walked 5 miles and then hitchhiked the rest of the way to get into work so he could operate a plow because he couldn't get out of his neighborhood. And that is an employee who says, there isn't anybody else who's going to do it if I'm not there, and I want to make sure that the city looks good and the way it needs to look when we have an emergency like that. And I think that's a pretty typical spirit that we have here. With Joe Strain, that's a water utility employee, one of our pump operators here. It was a snowplow operator that reports to Robert Goff. But Joe Strain has done that in the past as well.
And so what you're seeing is an illustration of what Dwight's talking about, because you said, was that Joe? Because you know employees.
That's right. That's right.
There are a lot of these stories.
Yes, sir.
My name is Don Ray, and I'd like to make a couple of comments here. I looked at your website yesterday to sort of get up the curve on the budget business. Excuse me, somebody is calling me. Probably my wife. That gets that to go over there. At any rate, there's nothing there in terms of long-range plan. And I really think the city needs a 5-year financial plan, not just looking at capital aspects in the school, but an overall plan looking at the costs, the expenditures, and the income. There's been a lot of talk here. It's very subjective. It has to be a certain amount of subjectivity in there, mind you. But I don't see any hardcore analysis the way you're going to get with with organizations I've been involved with in terms of long-range planning. But secondly, if you throw in the stormwater cost, our tax rate is 25% higher than Fairfax City. And I was wondering if you have an explanation as to the various factors that result in that 25% increase.
With respect to stormwater specifically?
If you throw that in, then it's 25% over.
Okay. With respect to the stormwater program itself, what you do see in Fairfax County, Arlington, and all of our surrounding jurisdictions is that all those costs are going up everywhere to meet the new Chesapeake Bay standards, and it is a big issue in local government. Fairfax County's, their financial plan is to ultimately have 5 cents on the tax rate for stormwater, and they're going incrementally up each year to get to that point. They made the choice to keep the stormwater fee in the tax rate, which ultimately makes it more expensive for the single-family homeowner, but they didn't go the route of the impervious coverage fee that we've done. One thing I would just say in terms of financial planning, long-range financial planning, we do work with our finance department to have 5-year forecasts. We discuss those with the city council. We make projections on revenue growth, on operating expenditure growth. Some of them are very knowable. Our pension plan, we forecast those out every year on a 5-year plan. Our capital program is very easy to project what those costs will be. Our operating budgets are, there's much more room for argument in terms of what their trajectory will be when you're talking 3 and 5 years out, as well as overall revenue growth. But within those debates that we have about those, we model those costs out for the 5-year plan as part of our capital improvements program.
Back to Fairfax City, the effect of the stormwater is fairly minor, actually. If you leave that out, you still have a roughly 22% increase in our tax rate compared with theirs. So can you explain or give me an indication of what the factors are resulting in that?
Okay. Well, it is, Fairfax City has one of the lowest tax rates in the region, and that is a fact. Arlington and Fairfax typically are right there in the Northern Virginia region as having the lowest rates. And one of the things that I noted that 35% of your real estate tax base in Fairfax City, 35% of that is in the commercial sector. And that is a big part of the differentiator as well. Because when you have that much of your land base that's in commercial uses, obviously you get that part of the property taxes, but also you get your business licenses, your personal property, your sales taxes that all come from that as well. So that's an advantageous position that Fairfax City is in. Well, I think probably from the city's perspective, the university is tax exempt, and so they complain about that aspect of it. But in terms of economic activity, that's where they get their big dividend, and there's no question about that. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Susan Jordan. I live in Gresham Place, which is the first street, unfortunately, that starts the City of Falls Church. I thought when I moved there 19 years ago it was Arlington, because I always lived in Arlington. In any event, and I love Arlington, and I like Falls Church too. That's why I've lived here for 19 years. I agree with Susan that the majority of people that move to the City of Falls Church now move here because of the schools. But that wasn't always the case, okay? I moved here 19 years ago, and I know a lot of people in the City of Falls Church that moved here because we worked in the city. It's a tremendous location. You're right off of 66. You're close to everything, and there are a lot of us that live here because of location, and still do, So I personally believe that the whole dynamic of the city has changed dramatically within the past maybe 10 years, where everybody just says, oh, everyone comes to Falls Church because of the schools. The schools are good. I applaud that. I believe in public education. I never personally had a kid in the school system, but I'm very happy to pay a higher percentage to educate the children that live here permanently in those big, huge $1.5 million houses. They are permanent residents. I guess where I get confused is with all this new development and all these new apartments, and the explosion seems to be coming more from the Oakwoods, the Pearson Squares, not the condominiums, Okay, and it would make sense to me that we would want to attract more people like me that wouldn't be having, contributing to the explosive growth of the schools. And I think we do everything to discourage people coming into the city because of the tax rate. Okay, I'm saying a lot of different things now. Here's my question, are places like Oakwood and Pearson Square, how are they taxed? Because we have a lot of kids that are coming into our school system, but they're very, very transient, I think they need to be educated, and, I'm certainly willing to give some of my money to them, but they're not the people that are going to be contributing to the city of Falls Church or even the entire area. A lot of them, live overseas and so on and so forth. And I just somehow think that we are getting we're paying for people that, and their children that, aren't really contributing to this little city per se. And I think one of the big problems, even with where I live now, the North Gate that's going to be opening, it's all apartments. Are we going to be adding a lot more children to our school system from those apartments? Because the city does have this wonderful reputation. Oh, gee, let's move here. Let's get a one-bedroom apartment, and I'll bring my 3 kids here and just keep crowding the schools for the kids that do live here, for the families that do pay fair taxes. So I just can't get my hands around it, and quite frankly, it makes me angry because people say, oh, well, if you don't like it, move out. Well, I like my house. I don't mind paying a high tax rate, but I don't want to have to keep paying higher and higher and higher every year. When is it going to stop? I am retired. I am on a fixed income, and I know a lot of people here are. I do value the little city attitude. I like being able to walk, down Broad Street or on Washington Street or go to the parks. But I don't know, when is it going to stop? When are we going to keep getting gouged? I mean, you just can't keep doing this to people. It's like, I live in stress because I keep thinking, God, what are my taxes going to be? This year they're going to be, last year they were $12,000. This year it's going to be more like $14,000. What do I personally get for that? You know what I mean? But I'm trying to be reasonable here. And I know I get passionate, so excuse me. But thank you. So can anybody, I want to know what the tax base is for all the Oakwoods.
Oakwood Apartments pays $1.6 million in real estate tax every year. They have 177 students right now at Oakwood Apartments. Okay. Sorry. But I've done this analysis, and it really irks me when people talk about apartments not paying their fair share. Okay? That works out to $9,039.55 per student at Oakwood Apartments. Okay? Do you pay $9,000 in real estate tax?
I pay more than that.
Okay. But
a lot more than that.
That's fine, but a lot of people in the city don't. Okay? Also, besides that, Oakwood Apartments is a business. Okay? They pay business taxes, they pay for, and when in the furnished apartments that they provide, they pay taxes on the beds, on the sheets, on the pillows, on everything that they lease out to people. Also, the people who live in Oakwood Apartment do shop in the city of Falls Church. Okay? So they pay meals taxes, and they pay personal property taxes on their automobiles that are here garaged in the city. They pay their fair share. So when people say people don't pay fair shares,
I'd like to see the balance of the actual residents. I really would like to see something. I don't know whether the city can put something on the website that kind of gives an analysis of what an individual homeowners pay versus the Pearson Squares. You're using Oakwood as an example. Is Pearson Square the same?
Pearson Square has 109 students, correct?
Yeah, we did advertise this as a conversation, and so, look, we're having a conversation.
We're now,
Yeah.
we're now having a
These
conversation.
are important questions, and it's an important from a policy perspective because there are land use applications before the city to build residential projects. The city's work on those projects is to go through a fiscal impact analysis. And for any project that has a residential component to it, it has to have a very powerful and compelling commercial component to it as well, because we know that the residential will have service costs with it. If the commercial component gets it over the hump, as it were, to being exemplary from a fiscal impact perspective, then it will merit positive consideration by the City Council. That's how that process works. And so for the Harris Teeter project, which is an apartment building, they have a grocery store in that project that will generate such significant revenue, and as well as be a good amenity for the community and help spur economic development in other areas of the downtown area, that the council and the city was willing to accept the residential component, knowing that it has service costs, in order to get that compelling commercial use with it. And every project is evaluated on that basis. For our older projects that are here in the city, they're taxed according to state law. And I tell you, tax law is very precise in the state of Virginia, and it's very tightly contested. And so there's just not a whole lot of room or wiggle room for a local government to be creative on the tax side, because that's very prescriptive by state law. And we have a question here.
Hi, Lori Huber on Berry Street. I came here today to talk about the stormwater fee, and there's been a lot of talk about other things, and I sort of hesitated, and then the gentleman brought up the stormwater fee, and there's been some emotion about the tax rate in general. And I have to say, I sort of share that emotion because it just keeps going up. And I was so pleased to see the stormwater fee be issued and set up the way it was. And I think a lot of people would disagree with me, and they think it's just piling on. But really, when you said there's not much room for being creative and doing things differently, the stormwater fee is magnificent, because old infrastructure that's failing terribly, that needs to be repaired and replaced. More rain than ever, all this construction, more roof, more roads, more rushing water into our storm drains, federal regulations that have been around for a while and just keep getting tighter and tighter, frankly, as they should be, that require local implementation, so you guys have no choice but to spend some money on our stormwater infrastructure. Well, originally, I think the city was looking at adding 2 or 3 cents to our tax rate. All the jurisdictions around us have done the same thing. That it couldn't be further from what is the optimum way to implement something like that. If you're a big property with lots of parking lot, lots of roof, you contribute tremendously to the stormwater problems. If you're a little house with a garden and you're willing to put out a cistern or change the front walkway to your house from concrete to impervious pavers, you should be rewarded for those actions financially, but you also are contributing to the solutions that the city is responsible for implementing. So you're rewarding people for doing the right thing, and you're quote-unquote punishing or taxing the people that are contributing to the problem. I strongly applaud the stormwater fee, and I want folks that are against it to read more carefully and think about why they're against it, because there's just no reason to be. And I would love to see more things implemented like that, so that we don't continue to pay more and more property taxes, because frankly, we can't afford it.
I happen to be strongly for everything that's going on in the stormwater area. One of my neighbors has been instrumental in setting that up. I believe in it. I believe in its tax.
By the way, I agree with you too. I think that a lot of the buildings that have the asphalt, the churches and so on and so forth, that don't contribute to the tax base, but they're contributing to major environmental problems. And they will be taxed, right? I mean, first they're going to be.
And there's things they can do to lessen their.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I totally agree. By the way, I saw that nice
new signs?
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
The garden.
The garden, yes.
Rainwater,
Uh-huh.
the rain garden.
Yeah, and we got state grants to put those rain gardens in, and so it's a great partnership between the city and the state. Yeah.
It looks really good. I was glad to see that. Well, see, I thought we paid for that.
And that's right. And so our public works staff. Well, we do. We ultimately get, but that's money that's going to be given out and going to be spent somewhere. And so it's great when our public works staff go out and grab that money and bring it to the city. And one other thing I'll just note on stormwater: the new development in the city. Whenever there is new development, they meet much higher standards than what were in place when the property was initially developed. So whenever you have a new building going in, you can be assured that there's going to be new stormwater detention and new stormwater treatment that helps people downstream.
Hi, I'm Mary Darn. I'm on East Columbia Street. We just moved in September of 2012, and before we renovated the house, we brought the plans to zoning and the assessor's office and said, what are the taxes on this house going to be? And he came up with a number, and we had the house when it was finished. They assessed it, and it was right on. September 2012. Since that, with the stormwater fee, our taxes have gone up 20%. So I'm trying to do this succinctly. That is the net result. It's an accident. The economy improved, the assessments went up, the tax rates have gone up twice since we visited the assessor that day, and the poor stormwater fee, I think, just suffers from really bad timing more than anything else. I think all I need is some reassurance. I don't know that any other jurisdiction in the country just happened to have all of its rates go up by 20% in less than 24 months. That's a lot. And I'm like her, I'm on a fixed income. I'm not sure we would have done the house if we'd known the taxes were going to go up by 20% in 14 months. So in my case, it's just some reassurance that you know that. You know we all can't. Did anybody in here get a raise of 20% in the last 14 months? I certainly didn't. And what other thing? What we see is, oh, costs have gone up, let's raise the assessment. Let's raise the tax rate. More aggressive reporting by the city of other things you're doing, other sources of income, where other things are happening to meet some of these costs. It feels like it's all on the back of the people who own residential real estate. Maybe it isn't. But when your taxes go up by 20% from 14,000 to 18,000, I shouldn't have said that. Now you know where I live. It feels very punitive. I like the schools, but that's a lot of money in a short time, and that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lindy Hockenberry, and I'm on the Planning Commission. I just wanted to address some of the planning efforts that we do. We have been working on small area plans and exactly looking at the cost or the value of the land and the value of the buildings on it. And for the most part, the value of land far, far exceeds the value of the buildings on it. So we know exactly where we can put some new development. And in the development, we are being very, very careful as far as the apartment sizes go and trying to bring in the young professionals that are over in Arlington, spread them out over here so they spend their money and are active within the city. So we're very careful. Yes, Pearson Square did cause us some problems. It was supposed to be a condominium, 2008. You know what happened, and so now it's a rental. But I do think that condominiums are coming back in some areas so that perhaps they are all certified to be a condominium, and so it is ready to go to be a for sale situation. So I just wanted to add, that we are very, very careful in our planning and in the capital improvements project. We spend a lot of time and effort, along with Ms. Mester. We quite long meetings as to where we get we've got a lot of grant funding coming in. And of course, Gary, yes, we do. We all spend, that's our money too. But at least it's coming back. And a lot of it's matching funds so that you don't get to use it unless you match it. But a lot of things are happening right now. And I think I'm very, very happy that we are moving forward to get a better tax base for our schools. I'm a long-term teacher in our city schools. Just occurred to me the other night that I spent all my years in the classroom dealing with the school board. Then I was on the city council, and then I'm on the planning commission, so I've seen this stuff from every which way. And I'm saying, whoa, you go far too many meetings, Lindy.
Hi, Bob Lajeunesse again. I forgot to ask my question last time when someone mentioned the fund balance, but even I realize the fund balance is a limited or finite resource. You can only tap into that so much. A longer-term way of smoothing out our revenue needs is our debt reliance. And currently our debt service is about 6% of our income, and there was mention there of the policy being 12%. My question is, what's magical about 12%? First of all, whose policy is it? I believe it's the council's own policy. Secondly, what's magical about 12% when homeowners are allowed to devote 40% of their income to mortgage debt alone? That's only their mortgage debt. Why is the city limited to 12% of its income, for example? And then another policy or guideline that we have is that we're going to pay for any of our capital expenditures. We're going to pay for half of those within 10 years. But if we build a high school or any other building, a library, I would think that that would have an estimated life of about 75 years. So why are we so keen to pay off half of it in 10 years? So I guess my question is, whose policies are they, and how flexible are they?
The city has adopted financial policies really since, I think, 2000, for a long period of time. And they do get looked at on a regular basis and then reaffirmed or amended, but the council is ultimately the decider of our financial policies. And one that the council has always been very rigorous about traditionally is not using one-time money for operating expenditures, and I think that is very important for the city's long-term financial sustainability. But all those policies, they're all geared to try to, they're not there just for academic purposes. They're really geared to try to help us accomplish our long-term goals. And we've got big, ambitious long-term goals on the capital side. So we want to be, strongly positioned to be able to accomplish those for the benefit of the community. Yes, sir, in the back.
You got the Fairfax Rebels, you got the Herndon Hornets, you got the James Madison Warhawks. There's city versus town, right? I mean, you got Fairfax City, Falls Church City, you got Herndon Town, Vienna Town. Why are the Rebels and the Hornets and the Warhawks part of Fairfax County school system, whereas the Mustangs are a totally different kind of deal?
Yes, that's a great question. You want to answer that? Sure.
Yeah. Actually, 63 years ago, the Mustangs would have been a part of Fairfax County, but at that time, the citizens of Falls Church seceded, is that the right word? Formed a city specifically to provide a better, more personal education to the students here in the city of Falls Church. And so with the formation of that city, we have our own government, our own police force, our own school division. And so that's a little bit of the history of our city. It was really carved out of Fairfax County as an independent entity to educate the students.
So Fairfax City is a lot more like Herndon and Vienna?
Fairfax City is, I don't know, I'm not an expert on Fairfax. I don't know what they are. Are they like us?
Yeah, they're an independent city like the city of Falls Church is. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir. Well, one thing that, in response to your question, one thing I didn't answer is, does the city do analysis of what our yield could be if we developed our commercial areas to their fullest extent? And as we have two tools. One, we have a fiscal impact model, which we pay for, which is a very sophisticated model that helps us analyze that. Second, we benefited from an intern who worked for the city at no charge and took that data and built it into our own homegrown model. This is Mr. Laporta. And it gave us a spreadsheet that allows us to do build-out analysis for our opportunity areas. And so we did land use planning with that fiscal impact model plugged into it, and that helped drive the decision-making on density and the types of uses that we want for our opportunity areas.
Assuming we maximize our development opportunities, will the cost burden shift at all away from homeowners and real estate taxes to commercial real estate taxes?
That's the goal. And it's kind of like what the Fed says about interest rates. Economic development in some respects is pushing a string. We try to create good conditions that are attractive for the market. But ultimately, the market has to come here and they have to build that. And we can't force that to happen. We just try to create a positive environment to allow that to happen.
But your model shows that given the positive environment, that the numbers work.
Yes.
That's my concern is I mean, a few more cents on the property tax rate this year, next year, is nuts next to me, frankly. My concern is that with the school continuing to grow as they show, and with absence any real development, we're going to be able to work. And there was one other chart with the capital, the amount of exposure that also increases a few more years of increasing tax.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And so if the economic development happens and if we keep our operating costs on a sustainable track, if those two things happen, we're a sustainable city. Right now, if you look at kind of where we are in terms of the tax rates, we're right there in the middle of the pack for the smaller jurisdictions. So that's one measure of, are we way out of line with everybody else? No, we're not right now. What are we going to be 10 years from now? That's what we're trying to make sure that the decisions we make today will put us in a position where we're sustainable 10 years from now. And I think one key thing is we don't want to enter into an environment where we have old infrastructure and a high tax rate that is higher than everybody else. That's an unsustainable position. And so we need to take care of our infrastructure now, and we need to keep our overall fiscal picture within the bounds of what people can accept.
I can understand why you wouldn't want to use the proceeds from the sale of an asset to pay operating expenses, but why wouldn't you use, say, the $14 million to pay the cost of the stormwater improvements for the next several years, making a lot of people very happy in this city?
The sale proceeds, what the council has laid out in terms of a general policy statement on the sale proceeds, which will ultimately inform what their decisions will be over the coming months on the actual disposition of the sale proceeds. But the policy direction is that the sale proceeds must be used for the long-term financial benefit of the taxpayers of the city and for all of the taxpayers of the city. And so want to avoid sort of special interest types of uses, want to avoid obviously subsidizing operating costs, but the water system was a capital asset. And so the sale proceeds should also be translated into a capital asset that has long-term benefit for the taxpayers of the city. That's the approach. Now we're working through the specifics on how best to do that. And the council will make those decisions over the coming months. It is, and so that's an eligible activity. I think I'll just speak not for the council now, but just sort of personally. I think the goal is to have highly visible projects, benefits that the community can say, okay, I get it. That the sale proceeds has produced this lasting benefit for the city. If stormwater meets that test, it may. But a lot of our stormwater projects are going to be kind of smaller spot repairs throughout the system. And so from that sort of symbolic perspective, those types of repairs might not rise up to that level of saying, okay, I get it. That was the benefit that we got from the sale of the water system. That's just a perspective on it, but ultimately the council needs to wrestle with that and make those decisions. I'm sorry? Is that water money invested? Is there any income? Right now, it is sitting in the city's pooled investments, which we do with other local governments. It's invested in very safe and low-yield instruments. And so our ultimate goal is to have an investment strategy that will produce a higher yield for a longer term, but also balance between what's in long-term investments versus what is going to be deployed for capital projects directly. And that's really sort of the issue, the bigger strategy that we need to work through in terms of the sale proceeds. Okay, it's about noon, and yes, sir. Let me take this question. Maybe we'll take one more after this, and then we'll let people go out into the bright sunshine and have a good Saturday.
Well, I also have concerns on why the money from the water system sale isn't going towards the stormwater runoff fees to help everybody out. It seems to me like you're hitting everybody with a tax they couldn't get prepared for. All these improvements that we could do to help get a discount on this tax are very expensive. Very expensive. I have a gravel driveway, and it's mind-boggling to me that that's an impervious surface. Also, what did the federal and state commissions or whatever tell you had to do with the stormwater runoff versus what's being done? From what I understand, I can't get a clear answer from anybody, or especially anything on paper. And especially, the only thing I have found out is that the gravel driveway situation is all on the city's determination. One of the problems I have too is, I did a lot of work with handicap ramps, extending the driveway wider to help my mom when she was alive and living in the house that was handicapped, and now I'm being charged tax. It's a tax, fee, whatever you want to call it, which I can't, you can't write off. Why aren't you starting out like Arlington does, and the older homes, they're not pushing for all this stuff. They get, from what I was told, 1 cent on every $100 of assessed value is what they're paying, which in my case would be about $55, which I could live with. The newer houses are going to be forced to do other things, which I can see. I can see that with the new buildings in town. But when you come back with a tax and all of a sudden you're being taxed for improvements you did to your property, I consider improvements, it just doesn't seem right. But I'd like to know what the federal government is stating and the state government versus what we're actually doing, because I feel like we're getting taxed above and beyond what we really need to be taxed.
It's a good question. What the federal mandate is that for the entire watershed of the Chesapeake Bay, that there's a total maximum daily load of pollution that is allowed to go into the bay. And they have a model that generates what that pollution number is, and then the cost of mitigating that is divvied out amongst all the jurisdictions, all the states and the local governments. And so our share of that is projected to be $15 million over the next 10 years. Fairfax County's share is projected to be $500 million. Arlington County is projected to be $150 million. These are huge costs. Obviously, there is a lot of pushback on it, but that is the mandate in law as it stands right now, and it's not going away as best we can tell. And so that's a big piece of what's driving these cost increase, throughout the area. The Fairfax County stormwater fee right now is 2.25 cents on their tax rate, and they have announced formally their plan that that's going to be 5 cents I think over a 3-year period. I don't recall exactly how many years they're planning to take there, but they have a plan to get to 5 cents to meet the overall cost, but to meet that mandate as well. In terms of the specifics on your property, I'd be happy to follow up with you after this meeting and talk with you about that in the credit program.
I assume this is probably going to go up every year, like taxes.
We're gonna try to manage these costs as best we can. What we do know is that our goal is to have impervious coverage not increase in the city. And so to the extent that that's sort of a set amount of impervious coverage in the city, then as costs go up, that rate ultimately is going to have to be adjusted from time to time, and that is a feature of it. We're going to do our best to keep those costs, to manage those costs effectively.
There's the fact that you make that expensive investment once, but you get the deduction in the fee every year. So it pays its back, or it becomes less and less expensive every year. And the total maximum daily load, that pollution that's going into the water is, and maybe some people don't really much care about this, but it is horribly detrimental to the environment around here, and it's getting worse so quickly because of the huge amount of construction going on in this area. It's devastating, and so, frankly, it's just a burden we have to bear. I don't think it's going anywhere. It's not going away.
The deadline was March 31st for people to apply for credits for the stormwater fee. How many people applied for those credits and for what value?
Yeah, I don't have that figure, but I'll get back with you on that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have been hearing that. I think the anticipation was that it was principally going to be people who had already had rain gardens or detention cisterns and things like that already on their property. The thing that people are trying to take advantage of is the stormwater, the SWIP, and that is what we had the deadline of March 30th to be able to process the bills that are going to be going out in May. And so I will get that number for you. The staff, the whole spirit behind the credit program, though, is our city residents do so many good things on stormwater with the way that the people try to treat their lawns, the way that they have for the rain barrels, the whole host of things that people do, the tree planting that's going on right now today with the neighborhood tree program. People ought to get credit for that. We need to accelerate that type of activity, not penalize it, and that's the spirit behind the credit program.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Paul Emer. I just had a quick question. I'm sorry I came in late, and I'm sure you already touched on this in the presentation, but it is on the reserve fee. I understand there's an emergency reserve that's put aside out of each budget, and I think there's a policy that there's a range, a low and a high range on that reserve, and I think, as I have read, that we're kind of at the high range. And so my question is, why could it not be considered to be at a lower range, so that would give some relief to some of the people, that some of the issues that have been brought up here today, for us to go to a lower range? And then the fee itself, how is that, where is that? I mean, and can that not be also invested in something that might bring back a little bit more of a return? I'm not saying we go to China and put the money in and speculate with it, but there must be some safe investments that you can put that you'd get more than 0 point ugly that you have by having it in the bank. So.
We did discuss the fund balance earlier, but you phrased the question a little bit differently. And one thing that I think your question helps clarify is that in the tax rate, in our operating revenues, there is no contribution to fund balance. That's been true this year and in the proposed budget. In prior years, in the 3 years that we were trying to dig out from a hole where we did a big drawdown on fund balance as we went through the recession and the water litigation and other adverse impacts, the City Council, in adherence with its policy, allocated operating revenues for fund balance restoration. They did that for 3 years. That's all done. We're now back to our policy target, so none of that's in the tax rate anymore. And instead, we're getting a dividend now where we're putting fund balance right into the capital improvements program to do park improvements, infrastructure improvements, improvements across the city. So that's, I did want to clarify that point in terms of the FY15 budget. What was the second question? Oh, in terms of the sale proceeds, well, yeah, fund balance, or here's the thing. Local governments in Virginia are very constrained in what we're allowed to invest funds in. Government securities, very safe AAA rated bonds and things like that. Local funds are not allowed to be invested in China or equities or anything like that. And there's good reasons for that. Our pension fund, on the other hand, is a professionally managed fund which is invested in a whole range of equities, foreign investments, real estate investment trusts, the whole host of things that a pension fund is normally invested in. And so one of the proposals for the use of the sale proceeds is potentially to put some of that in the pension fund, generate a return which would reduce the city's annual required contribution to pensions, and then take those savings and deploy them for capital. And that's a way that you can get a higher yield out of the sale proceeds. That's one that's under discussion, and we need to work through the details of that before final decisions are made. And with that, then, it is noon. Let me ask Vice Mayor Snyder or Mayor Tarter to make any final remarks. And before I turn the microphone over, and also Chairman Carney, let me express my appreciation for you all to be here. This is what local government is all about. I think there's some very valuable input to the budget today, so thank you.
When we started this session a couple hours ago, we were hoping to have a good conversation, and we've clearly had that. Everything that you've said, we've listened to, we'll be paying a lot of attention to. I was impressed at all the comments and all the expertise that you bring to bear, so we'll be working to see how we can balance all this out as effectively as we possibly can. I heard a lot of interest in long-term, what's our planning, what's the long-term sustainability of the city, how we bring the apparent trend in tax rates under control. Those are great comments, and we, as has been mentioned, we've been doing a lot of planning, but some of it hasn't been as visible as it needs to be to our citizens. So we need to do that, and we want to do some visioning as well. What do you want this place to look like in 20 years from now, in terms of the fact that we're right here on the edge of Tyson's Corner and surrounded by other rapidly developing commercial areas? How do we maintain our uniqueness but also make ourselves as affordable as we can? I heard a lot of interest in use of various fund balances and long-term amounts of money that we have. We're not going to exhaust that money recklessly in terms of subsidizing an operating budget, but we've heard you very clearly as to how you want that money deployed for long-term issues. We heard, of course, concern with the overall tax rate and the combination of the tax rate and the water fee. We heard about your questions. You want to know that the schools are providing a first-rate education. You want to know what you're getting for your city dollars. We didn't talk a lot about city services. Our average response time is about 2.5 minutes. Our fire department is world-class. So we're working very, very hard to make sure that the services that you get and the school board and the school community is doing the same thing, so you get value for your money. We've heard not so much really about the fiscal context in which we exist. I think you heard briefly the fact that we get less than 10% of our city budget from the state. So you're paying a lot of money in state sales taxes, because most of the sales taxes you pay, they go to the state. That state income tax you pay goes to the state. Very little of that comes back. And unlike the federal government, we can't print money. So we're really dealing with the day-to-day and long-term realities. And I want to tell you that this has been a great conversation. We're taking it all very, very seriously. We'll be working in this budget year to find a balance. It's clearly not going to please everybody. And certainly I pay the same tax as everybody else does, and I'm not happy about that either. So we're taking that into account. We're working very hard. I hear that you want some more reassurance from us about long-term sustainability, and it's our job to provide that to you. So I want to just conclude by thanking you all very much. Everything you've said has been carefully listened to. I've listened to it. I plan to go back to it as we make our immediate decisions and our long-term decisions. So thanks again.
I'm Dave Harder, the mayor. I'd like to echo Mr. Snyder's comments and basically just thank you all for coming out. We have 5 out of the 7 city council people here today, and the majority of us attend all of these budget meetings. So we really are interested in what you have to say. We can be approached after the meeting electronically by email. You can call us. Most of our numbers, cell phones and the like, are publicly available. So we are here and we are engaged in this process. There are more meetings, as you probably heard earlier, on the budget, and I invite you to continue to be actively engaged as you are. And we do appreciate your comments. So thank you very much for turning out and have a nice day.
Thank you.